The great crystal dome of the Galactic Council stretched across the sky like a fallen star. Inside, beings from 100 different worlds sat in perfect circles, their voices mixing in languages that had existed since before Earth's sun was born. At the center of it all, the ethereals floated in their chambers of pure light. Commander of the fleet stood before the council with his head bowed. His crystalline skin, once bright as diamonds, now looked dull and cracked. Behind him, holographic images showed the horror that had consumed the outer rim worlds. Empty space where planets used to be. Nothing left but cosmic dust and silence. "The void swarm grows stronger," said, his voice breaking the silence. 442 befell 3 days ago. 15 billion souls gone in hours. The creatures just ate everything. The land, the oceans, even the air. The council members shifted uneasily. The Nexus Collective, beings who had uploaded their minds into perfect machines, processed the data with mechanical precision. The tall and graceful with their glowing blue skin reached out with their psychic powers to feel the truth of his words. Even they pulled back in horror. High Counselor Thane, an ancient being whose people had mastered space travel when most worlds were still forming, spoke in a voice like distant thunder. "How long before they reach the core systems?" 6 months, replied. "Maybe less. Our fleets cannot stop them. Every battle we win costs us ships we cannot replace. Every battle we lose." He gestured to the empty spaces on the star charts. In their chambers of light, the ethereals stirred. These beings had given up physical form long ago, becoming creatures of pure energy and thought. They rarely spoke directly to the younger races, preferring to work through prophecy and ancient wisdom. But now, their voices filled the dome like singing crystal. "The prophecy speaks," the lead ethereal said. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "In the time of great darkness, when the devourers rise from the void between stars, saviors will come. Warriors born of struggle, forged in conflict, who know no surrender. They will come from a world of iron and fire, where peace is earned through strength and love is proven through sacrifice." The council buzzed with excitement. Everyone knew the stories. They had studied warfare for thousands of years, turning battle into an art form. Their warriors meditated for decades before each campaign, seeking perfect harmony between mind and blade. The Nexus Collective had built fleets that could calculate every possible outcome of a battle before it began. Their ships moved like clockwork, each part working in perfect coordination with the whole. They could link their minds across light years, coordinating attacks with thoughts faster than any communication system. "The prophecy must speak of the," said Counselor, her scales shimmering with hope. "Who else has mastered the warrior's path so completely?" "Or perhaps the Nexus fleets," suggested another voice. "Their tactical systems are beyond anything else in the galaxy." High Counselor Thane nodded slowly. "Send word to all the great warrior nations. The Nexus Collective, the battle minds. Let them know the galaxy calls for its greatest champions." Felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. If the prophecy was true, if the great warrior races could unite against the swarm, perhaps they had a chance. Far away, in a small system on the edge of the galaxy's spiral arm, none of this mattered to Admiral Sarah. She stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Resolute, watching her tactical display with tired eyes. 3 months of chasing asteroid miners who thought they could ignore shipping lanes, and her biggest worry was whether the coffee would last until they reached Mars. "Admiral, we're getting some weird signals from the outer sensor net," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. "Might be equipment malfunction, but it looks like ships, big ones, moving fast toward the inner system." Rubbed her temples. She had joined the Earth Defense Force to explore the stars, not to play space traffic cop. Probably just more mining ships trying to skip customs, set an intercept course. Let's go remind them that even in space, there are still rules. She had no way of knowing that the signals came from 3 dying ships, their crews barely alive after escaping the destruction of their ships that carried the last survivors of a civilization older than human history. Ships that brought with them news of an enemy that ate worlds. The survivors had chosen Earth's system almost by accident. Their damaged navigation systems could only take them so far, and this small yellow star had seemed safe, hidden away from the major space lanes, with only one inhabited world, a primitive planet whose people had barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. Commander's cousin, Sub-Commander In, lay dying in the medical bay of the lead ship. With his last breath, he had whispered the words that would change everything. "The prophecy," he gasped. "Warriors born of struggle, look for a world where they fight each other, where they know pain, where they choose to protect even when protection costs everything." As Admiral's ships moved to intercept what she thought were smugglers, the dying ships broadcast their first message toward Earth, a plea for help in a language no human had ever heard, a warning about creatures that devoured light itself, a desperate hope that somewhere in the galaxy, someone still knew how to fight. The message would reach Earth in 6 hours. First contact would happen not in the careful, planned way that Earth's diplomats had imagined, not with peaceful explorers or wise teachers, but with the last survivors of a massacre begging for help from a world that had never known peace. The ethereals had spoken truly. Saviors would come, but they would not be what anyone expected. Admiral Sarah had seen many strange things in her 20 years with the Earth Defense Force, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The 3 alien ships hung in space like broken jewels, their hull plating cracked and burned. They were beautiful despite the damage-flowing lines that seemed grown rather than built, covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Admiral, they're broadcasting on multiple frequencies," Lieutenant Torres reported, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "The computer is trying to translate, but it's like nothing in our databases." Stared at the ships on her main screen. Each one was easily 3 times the size of her flagship, but they barely showed any power signatures. Whatever had happened to them, they were barely alive. "Keep our distance," she ordered. "Full defensive posture, but do not target them unless they show hostile intent." She paused, realizing that everything had just changed. "And someone wake up Doctor. Tell her that first contact protocol is now active." Doctor had dreamed of this moment since she was a child, the first meeting between humanity and alien intelligence. She had always imagined it would happen in a laboratory, with careful preparations and diplomatic protocols, not rushed from her bed at 3 in the morning to face dying strangers in the void. The translation computers worked for 6 hours before they could make sense of even basic words. What came through made blood run cold. "Help us," the message said. "Our worlds are gone, billions dead. The swarm comes, it eats everything. Planets, stars, light itself. We are the last." The lead alien ship sent over a small craft. It moved slowly, obviously damaged, but it carried something precious, a survivor who could speak directly with them. Sub-Commander looked like a walking crystal statue, 8 feet tall with skin that sparkled even under the harsh lights of the human shuttle bay. But his beauty was marred by deep cracks across his body, and one of his 4 arms hung useless at his side. Doctor approached him carefully. The translation device on her chest worked better now, turning his musical language into words she could understand. "You are the ones from the prophecy," said, his voice filled with desperate hope. "You must be, warriors born of struggle, your system. I can feel it. So much conflict, so much pain, but also so much strength." Looked confused. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a mistake. We're not warriors, we're explorers, scientists. Earth has been at peace for over 50 years. Hope flickered and died. Peace. But the readings. Your ships carry weapons that could destroy moons. Your crew moves like soldiers. Your leader thinks in terms of battle formations and defensive positions." Admiral stepped forward. She had been listening to every word. Our ships carry weapons because space is dangerous. We think about defense because we've learned that hope for the best means nothing if you don't prepare for the worst. But we're not the warriors you're looking for. She gestured to the damaged alien ships visible through the shuttle bay windows. We can offer medical aid, supplies, maybe temporary shelter. But if you're looking for some kind of galactic army, you've come to the wrong place. Over the next 3 days, as human medical teams worked to save the dying survivors, the truth slowly emerged. Shared recordings of the Void Swarm attacks, watched in horror as creatures made of living darkness swept across star systems, consuming everything in their path. Planets stripped clean in hours. Entire civilizations vanishing without a trace. But what struck her most was how the galaxy had fought back. She watched recordings of battle fleets moving in perfect formation, their ships dancing through space like they were performing a ballet. Beautiful, graceful, completely ineffective. "You fight like you're putting on a show," said after watching the 5th battle recording. "Where are your ramming attacks? Why don't you target their engines? Why does every ship retreat at the first sign of damage?" Looked shocked. "Ramming, you would destroy your own ships. If it wins the war, yes. But the crews would die. Some would, others would live because the mission succeeded." Studied the alien's expression. "How do you win battles if you're not willing to accept losses?" We fight with honor, we preserve life. We seek victory through wisdom and skill, not brutal sacrifice." Was beginning to understand. She pulled up Earth's military history on her tablet. "Look at this. The Battle of Midway, World War II. Admirals sent torpedo bombers against superior enemy forces. Most of the pilots knew they would die. They attacked anyway because their sacrifice would give the dive bombers a chance to strike." The recordings showed human aircraft diving through walls of enemy fire, pressing attacks even as they burned. Watched in fascination and horror. They chose to die. They chose to win. There's a difference. Switched to another recording. "Stalingrad. My ancestors held a city for months against impossible odds. They fought in buildings, in sewers, for every single block. The enemy had better weapons, more soldiers, air support. But they lost because humans don't know when to quit." Doctor joined them, carrying her latest analysis of the Void Swarm samples. "I've been studying the biological components they left behind," she said. "The galaxy sees them as some kind of cosmic horror, but really they're just very efficient predators. They have weaknesses, coordination nodes that could be targeted, vulnerable periods in their feeding cycle." "You see weaknesses where we see only death," said quietly. "We see problems to be solved," replied. "Every predator can be stopped if you understand how it hunts." Made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. "Lieutenant Tors, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need the fleet, all of it." "Admiral," Tors looked confused. "We're just supposed to be offering humanitarian aid." "The mission parameters just changed." Turn 2. "Your people came looking for warriors. You found scientists who think like soldiers and explorers who fight like demons when they have to. Maybe that's not what your prophecy expected, but it's what you've got." Stared at her for a long moment. "You would fight. Your people would die for worlds you've never seen, for beings you just met." "That's what we do," said simply. "We protect what needs protecting. Sometimes that means being willing to pay the price that others won't." For the first time since his world had died, allowed himself to hope. Perhaps the prophecy had been right after all. Warriors born of struggle. They just didn't look like anything the galaxy had expected. The combined fleet gathered at the edge of the Rigel system looked like nothing that had ever flown together before. Sleek vessels with their crystal hulls floated alongside human warships that looked like flying weapons factories. The contrast was stark beauty next to brutality, art next to engineering. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display. The Void Swarm had arrived in Rigel 6 hours ago. 300 creatures that looked like living shadows, each one the size of a city block. They were systematically consuming the system's fourth planet, stripping away its atmosphere layer by layer. Fleet status report, ordered. 67 ships total, reported Commander, her tactical officer. 28 human vessels, 39. The ships outgun us 3-1, but... He paused. But what? They're asking for permission to arrange their fleet in ceremonial formation before we attack. Something about honoring the dead properly. Closed her eyes and counted to 5. 3 weeks of joint training had shown her the gap between human and thinking. The aliens were warriors, but they fought like it was a sacred ritual. Humans fought like it was a job that needed doing. Tell them we attack in 30 minutes, formation or no formation. Sub-Commander's voice came through the communication system. Admiral, with respect, my people need time to prepare their minds for battle. We must meditate on our purpose, center our thoughts. Interrupted. Those things down there are eating a planet. Every minute we wait, another 1,000,000 tons of matter gets consumed. We don't have time for meditation. The attack began badly. The ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns that created beautiful light displays across space. They targeted the void creatures with surgical precision, trying to disable rather than destroy. The human ships charged straight into the swarm like angry hornets. Captain of the destroyer Indomitable led the human assault. His ship was small compared to the alien vessels, but it moved like a hunting shark. Instead of staying with the fleet, he took his ship straight at the largest void creature. "What are you doing?" His voice crackled over the radio. "You're breaking formation." "Formations for parades, Admiral," replied. "I'm going hunting." The Indomitable dove between 2 void creatures, its guns blazing. Human weapons weren't as elegant as energy beams, but they were designed for one purpose: maximum damage in minimum time. Armor-piercing shells and nuclear warheads tore into the creature's dark flesh. Commander watched in shock as more human ships broke away from the main fleet. Instead of the careful, coordinated attack he expected, the humans fought like wild animals. Ships scattered in all directions, attacking from every angle at once. "This is madness," he said to his tactical officer. "They have no discipline, no coordination. They'll be destroyed in minutes." But the humans weren't being destroyed. They were winning. The void creatures, used to fighting fleets that moved in predictable patterns, couldn't adapt to the chaotic human attack. Every time a creature turned to face one human ship, 3 others would hit it from behind. The humans didn't fight to look good, they fought to kill. "Indomitable to fleet," his voice came through the communication system. "I've got a big one cornered, but my engines are gone, requesting immediate support." Looked at her tactical display. Ship was trapped between 2 massive void creatures, both moving in for the kill. The nearest ship could reach him in 5 minutes. Too late. "Get out of there. Abandon ship and we'll pick you up." "Negative, Admiral. I've got a clear shot at their coordination node. If I can take it out, the whole cluster will lose formation." Realized what he was planning. "No, we can find another way." "Sometimes the hard way is the only way," replied. "Tell my crew they did good." The Indomitable's reactor went critical exactly as rammed it into the largest void creature. The explosion lit up half the system, vaporizing the creature and sending shockwaves through the entire swarm. In seconds, the organized void attack fell apart into chaos. The remaining human ships pressed their advantage. They didn't mourn their lost comrades, they used their sacrifice. Every human captain seemed to understand that death meant something only if they made it count. Watched in amazement as the human fleet coordinator, Lieutenant Sarah, calmly directed ships into position while calculating acceptable loss ratios in her head. "All ships, target the creatures clustered around Grid 77, ordered. Estimated casualties will be 15%, but we can eliminate 30% of their remaining force." 15% casualties, tactical officer whispered in horror. That's 12 ships, hundreds of lives. But the humans didn't hesitate. They followed orders that would have caused riots in any fleet. The battle turned into a rout. The void creatures, bred to feed on civilizations that valued every life, couldn't handle an enemy that counted lives as ammunition to be spent wisely. Human ships rammed creatures that couldn't be killed any other way. Crews volunteered for suicide missions without being asked. Captain Lisa Torres of the cruiser Defiant found herself surrounded by 3 void creatures. Instead of calling for help, she ordered her crew to abandon ship, set the reactor to overload, and used her ship as a guided missile. "This is Torres," she broadcast as her ship accelerated toward the enemy. "If anyone writes this up for the history books, make sure they spell my name right." The Defiant took out 2 creatures when it exploded and crippled a third. When the smoke cleared, the void swarm was gone. Destroyed or fled, it didn't matter. The planet below was saved, even if it would take centuries to recover. The cost made sick. 18 human ships destroyed, nearly 2,000 lives lost. The humans called it a victory. "How can you celebrate?" he asked Admiral as damage reports came in. "So many of your people died." "Looked tired but determined. They died doing their job, protecting things that needed protecting. That's not something to mourn, that's something to honor." But the losses were acceptable, finished, because the mission succeeded, and Torres and all the others knew the risks. They chose to take them because someone had to. Stared at the human admiral. He was beginning to understand why the prophecy had spoken of warriors born of struggle. These humans didn't fight like warriors at all. They fought like people who had learned that sometimes the only way to save what you love is to be willing to lose everything for it. The galaxy had found its saviors. They just weren't anything like what anyone had expected them to be. 3 months after the Battle of Rigel, the galaxy was divided. News of humanity's victory had spread to every system, but so had stories of their methods. In the crystal halls of the Ashanti Confederacy, elegant beings with wings like stained glass spoke in horrified whispers about human barbarism. In the digital networks of the Nexus Collective, artificial minds calculated the probability that humanity would become a bigger threat than the void swarm itself. Admiral stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, feeling the weight of 100 different gazes. Some looked at her with hope, others with fear. All of them saw her as something new and dangerous. "The humans have won 7 major battles in the past month," High Counselor Thane announced. 17 systems have been liberated. The Void Swarm's advance has stopped for the first time since the invasion began. Polite applause rippled through the chamber, but could hear the tension underneath. Counselor of the Ashanti rose from her perch, her crystalline wings catching the light. "We are grateful for human assistance," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "But we must discuss the cost. The humans show no regard for civilian casualties. They destroy infrastructure without thought for rebuilding. They treat war like butchery." "Because it is," replied simply. "War is an art, Counselor. It's not a dance or a game. It's about making your enemy stop doing things you don't want them to do. Everything else is just decoration." The chamber erupted in angry voices. The tall blue beings who communicated as much through telepathy as speech actually recoiled from thoughts. One of them spoke for the group. "Your mind is like a weapon," they said. "When we touch your thoughts, we feel hunger, not for food or pleasure, but for victory. At any cost, it frightens us." Doctor stepped forward from where she had been observing quietly. "May I speak, Admiral?" Nodded, had become humanity's unofficial ambassador, the bridge between human pragmatism and alien idealism. "I've been studying with Subcommander," began, "learning about philosophy, about how civilized species approach conflict. It's beautiful, elegant, based on principles that took millions of years to develop." She paused, looking around the chamber. But it doesn't work against the Void Swarm. You've been fighting them for 2 years and losing ground every day. In 3 months, we've pushed them back to the outer rim. By sacrificing everything decent about warfare, Counselor protested. By doing what works, replied. Humans aren't more violent because we like violence. We're more violent because our entire history has been about survival. Every generation faced something that wanted to destroy them. Predators, diseases, other humans, natural disasters. We learned that sometimes the only choice is to be more dangerous than whatever threatens you. Commander stood up from his place among the delegation. His crystalline body still showed cracks from his last battle, fighting alongside human marines against a void incursion on 438C. I have fought beside humans for 3 months, he said. I have seen things that would have horrified me before the war began. Human soldiers who cover grenades with their own bodies to protect their comrades. Pilots who fly damaged ships into enemy formations because they're too hurt to escape anyway. Engineers who stay behind to detonate charges that will save cities, knowing they'll die in the explosion. He looked directly at Counselor. You call this barbarism, but I call it love. They don't fight because they enjoy killing. They fight because they cannot bear to let others suffer. The violence comes from compassion, not cruelty. The debate continued for hours. Some species wanted to limit human involvement, to fight the Void Swarm using civilized methods. Others argued that survival mattered more than principles. While the politicians argued, received the report that changed everything. Lieutenant's voice crackled through her communicator. Admiral, you need to see this. Long-range sensors have detected something at coordinates 007 by 42. Stepped out of the chamber and activated her personal display. What she saw made her blood freeze. A structure the size of a small moon, organic and twisted, surrounded by thousands of void creatures. It pulsed with dark energy that seemed to bend space around it. What am I looking at, Lieutenant? We think it's the source, Admiral. The thing that's been coordinating all the swarm attacks. Our techs are calling it the Nexus. Studied the tactical data. The structure was heavily defended and positioned deep in space that had been stripped clean by the swarm. Any attack would have to cross light years of empty void with no support, no retreat options. How long before it reaches the core systems? At current speed, 6 weeks, maybe less. Closed the communication and stood in the corridor for a moment, thinking. Around her, the debate continued. Voices raised in anger and fear, species arguing about honor and civilization while their enemy prepared for the final strike. She made her decision. When returned to the chamber, she waited for a break in the argument before speaking. While you've been debating philosophy, she said, we've located the source of the Void Swarm, a structure we're calling the Nexus. It's headed for the galactic core, and when it arrives, this war is over. The chamber fell silent. I'm requesting permission to lead a joint fleet against the Nexus. Full commitment. Every ship that can fly, every weapon we can carry. One final battle. High Counselor Thane leaned forward. What are the projected casualties for such an attack? Met his gaze steadily. 70% minimum, maybe higher. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Counselor looked sick. You're asking us to commit suicide. I'm asking you to win a war, replied. The Nexus has to be destroyed. If we wait for a perfect solution, there won't be anyone left to save. The representative spoke again. Your plan requires us to think like humans, to accept losses that our civilizations have never contemplated, to become killers. Yes, said simply, it does. The vote, when it came, was closer than had hoped. 47 species voted to support the attack, 33 voted against, 20 abstained. As the session ended, approached her in the corridor. My ships will be ready in 72 hours, he said. My crews, they're learning to think like humans. It terrifies them, but they're learning. And if we lose, asked. His damaged face managed something that might have been a smile. Then we lose fighting. That's something humans taught us. Sometimes how you lose matters as much as whether you win. Nodded and walked toward the hangar where her ship waited. In 72 hours, the largest fleet in galactic history would launch toward almost certain death. But they would launch together. The largest fleet in galactic history hung in space like a city of stars. Ships from 60 different worlds, their hull designs as varied as the species that built them. At the center of it all, Admiral watched the tactical display and tried not to think about how many would die in the next few hours. The void nexus dominated the view ahead. Up close, it looked even more terrible, a living planet covered in writhing tentacles and pulsing with dark energy. Around it, thousands of void creatures swirled like a hurricane of living shadow. Fleet status report, ordered. 847 ships ready for combat, Commander replied, including the MindLink vessels and the new Nexus collective tactical computers running human battle algorithms. Nodded. The past month had changed everyone. The elegant Ashanti had retrofitted their crystal ships with human-designed armor plating. The logical Nexus collective had programmed their computers to think irrationally, to make the kind of desperate decisions that humans called heroic and aliens called insane. Most surprising of all were the peaceful psychic race had volunteered to link their minds directly with human combat veterans, sharing thoughts and emotions in ways that would have been unthinkable before the war. Admiral, came the voice of Mind Speaker, the link is established. My people can feel your warriors' thoughts. The intensity is overwhelming, but we are ready. Doctor, now serving as liaison between all the different species, activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Doctor. Remember what we've learned. The Nexus coordinates through bioelectric pulses. If we can disrupt the pattern for even a few minutes, the entire swarm will lose coordination. How close do we need to get? Asked Captain Thane, commanding a joint human strike force. Close enough to touch it, replied grimly. The attack began with 1,000 ships moving as one. But unlike every other battle in galactic history, they didn't move in perfect formation. They moved like humans, chaotic, unpredictable, absolutely deadly. The void creatures rushed to meet them, expecting another orderly battle they could win through superior numbers. Instead, they faced an enemy that had learned human tactics. Ships broke formation to ram void creatures, their crews chanting battle prayers that mixed ancient warrior wisdom with human concepts like acceptable losses and mission first. Nexus collective vessels calculated the exact moment to sacrifice themselves for maximum damage. Psychics, their minds linked with human marines, felt the sharp joy of combat for the first time in their species' history. Strike Group Alpha, move to attack Position 7, ordered. Beta Group, prepare for suicide run on the Nexus core. Roger that, came the reply from Captain Tor's sister to the pilot who had died at Rigel. Beta Group acknowledges. It's been an honor flying with you all. Commander led his squadron of modified ships in a diving attack on the Nexus's outer defenses. His vessel, once a thing of beauty, now bristled with human weapons and armor plating that made it look like a crystalline battleship. Remember, he told his pilots over the communication system, we fight not for glory but for survival, not for ourselves but for those who cannot fight. This is the human way. This is the way of love expressed through violence. His ships hit the Nexus defenses like a crystal hammer. Void creatures swarmed to stop them, but more ships kept coming. Human vessels, Ashanti light fighters, Nexus heavy cruisers, all working together in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The breakthrough came when Mind Speaker made the ultimate sacrifice. She opened her psychic abilities completely, linking every conscious being in the fleet into a single shared mind. For one terrible, beautiful moment, 1,000 different species thought with one purpose. This body couldn't handle the strain. Her last telepathic message echoed through every mind in the fleet. Now you understand. We are all one people, one family, fight for each other. With sacrifice, the fleet moved like a single organism. Human tactical thinking guided precision. Nexus logic drove Ashanti speed. Every species contributed what they did best, all coordinated by the shared understanding of what needed to be done. Admiral found herself in direct command of ships she'd never seen before, crews she'd never met, all united by the psychic link. All ships, final assault, target the core. Remember, we don't need to survive, we just need to win. The final attack was chaos and beauty combined. Ships from every corner of the galaxy flew straight at the Nexus core, ignoring the defenses, accepting losses that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Doctor, piloting a converted science vessel loaded with experimental weapons, broadcast on all frequencies as she dove toward the Nexus center. This is for every world you destroyed, for every life you took, for every child who will never see their parents again. Her ship's weapons, designed to disrupt bioelectric patterns, fired point-blank into the Nexus core. The explosion lit up half the galaxy. The void nexus convulsed, its coordination signals disrupting. Around it, thousands of void creatures suddenly stopped moving, their shared intelligence broken. Some fled into deep space. Others simply dissolved, unable to exist without the nexus's guiding force. When the light faded, the nexus was gone. So were half the ships in the combined fleet. Admiral stood in her damaged bridge, looking at the casualty reports. 400 ships lost, nearly 200,000 lives. By the standards of galactic warfare, it was a massacre. By human standards, it was a victory worth celebrating. Subcommander's voice came through the communication system, weak but alive. Admiral, the swarm is retreating. Long-range sensors show them falling back to the galactic rim. We actually won. 6 months later, stood before the rebuilt Galactic Council. The chamber looked the same, but everything had changed. The species that survived the war carried themselves differently now. They had learned something from humanity, that sometimes love meant being willing to fight for what you cared about. The ethereals have given us a new prophecy, High Counselor Thane announced. They say the warriors came from Earth, and they saved us all. But the greatest victory was not the defeat of the swarm. It was learning that saviors don't always look like what we expect. Smiled slightly. The ethereals got one thing wrong. We didn't save you. We taught you to save yourselves. The real warriors were the ones who learned to fight when fighting was the only choice left. She looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds, all of them changed by their contact with humanity. The galaxy would never be the same. It would be stronger, more willing to defend itself, better prepared for the next threat that came from the darkness between stars. The prophecy had been fulfilled, just not in the way anyone expected. The saviors had come from a world of struggle. They had brought with them the knowledge that peace was worth fighting for, that love sometimes required sacrifice, and that the greatest victory was not avoiding a fight, but winning one that mattered. The warriors of Earth had kept their promise. They had saved the galaxy, but more importantly, they had taught the galaxy how to save itself.